Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you had a great weekend. Back at it this week. This is the first week of that dead period for the 49ers where their offseason program is officially over. I'm sure there's still some players kind of lingering around and working out on a daily basis in Santa Clara, but team is gone. They're excused. The rookies, I believe, will be back July 15th. They can report a week ahead of the veterans. The veterans report on the 22nd of July as they get this thing ramped up. At that point, during this period of time, it's just stay in shape, stay in the playbook a little bit, know what you want to do, know how you want to get there, see the things that maybe the coaching staff outlined as far as areas to improve on, areas of emphasis for the workouts. And then when they get back in July, it's all systems go. Okay, so we wrapped up, the 49ers wrapped up their offseason program, and at the conclusion of the offseason program, I had a chance to sit down with John Lynch, general manager of the 49ers, to kind of go through the offseason and where the team is right now. So you can check out that entire interview over on the podcast. 49ers Talk with myself, Matt Mayoko, and Jennifer Lee Chan, available anywhere and everywhere you get your podcasts. But I think this is about a 20 something minute conversation with John Lynch. And we just basically went through the offseason and where the team is now. So some of the points I just wanted to talk about and to hit on was, the way this offseason started for the 49ers. And, all the discussion early on was about the players that they didn't bring back. And there were many, as you well know. And it was something that John Lynch telegraphed to the fan base and speaking to the media at the NFL Scouting Combine in February. And, it's one of those things where I think he kind of braced everybody for it, or certainly outlined what the plan was. But still, when it happened, probably a little bit of a shock to the system. And that's kind of what he had to say about that. And then, one of the things, or the thing that they knew that they wanted to do, was uh, basically use the draft as the major source of replenishing the roster. So they did pick up some free agents. They picked up Luke Farrell, they picked up Jason Pinnock, they picked up Trey Brown, and some others. But their number one plan for replenishing the roster through their losses in free agency was certainly through the draft. And I don't know that I thought that they would go into the draft with 11 picks and then come out of the draft with 11 picks, but that's exactly what they did. But just think about all those players they lost. And according to John Lynch, it's the most free agent dollars ever spent from a team, or I should say, the rest of the NFL spent more money attracting 49ers free agents than has ever been spent on a team's departing free agents in history. Um, I will take him at his word for that. I can't verify that, but when you think about the huge contracts that Aaron Banks signed, Charvarius Ward, heck, even Jalen Moore, and he's kind of the centerpiece. The 49ers continuously talk about how their swing tackle got $30 million over 2 years from Kansas City. Dre Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga. So, they lost a lot of frontline guys. They lost a lot of starters. And even, like I said, Jalen Moore, $30 million over 2 years. But when they lost all those players, they still had to wait, whatever it was, 6 months, or not 6 months, 6 weeks before the draft. What John Lynch said that it was a little uneasy, but he said during that time, it was uneasy not knowing that they didn't have a full roster and that they wouldn't have a full roster until the draft. But he said you just have to understand that you're executing a plan. And that was definitely the 49ers plan. It's to get younger, um, get more manageable contracts, even a first round pick like Michael Williams, his contract kind of pales in comparison to a guy on his, to a really good player on his second contract. So you're reducing the cost. You're kind of slashing costs for later on. And that's, I mentioned the free agents who left, but also Debo Samuel, um, being able to trade him, getting rid of his contract, the releases of Javon Hargrave, Malik Collins, and Leonard Floyd. So all that kind of played into it. One of the things that really stands out about this offseason is that in the past, the 49ers have used the draft as a look ahead for a year. Hey, there's a free agent who's coming up next year, probably not going to be able to keep him. So let's draft his replacement now, kind of develop him so that he's ready to go in his second year. That's not necessarily the case this year. And what John Lynch had to say about that when I asked him, he said, there are certainly going to be opportunities for those guys to compete or to contribute right away. And he said, opportunity is a good thing. And, a guy like Michael Williams, they're going to rely on him from the very beginning to be a base down defensive end, set the edge, and then potentially be a player that moves inside to rush the passer in nickel situations. But he said that Michael Williams in particular was a player that they really coveted with that number 11 overall pick. And he said we were crossing our fingers that he would be there. And he was there. 49ers did, they made no bones about it. They fully, said that they were looking to trade up in order to get Michael Williams. They didn't have to trade up because I think, when all those other spots kind of fell into place with teams taking players at other positions, whether it was Terrell McMillan or the big offensive tackle from Texas, when those guys kind of fell into place on the offensive side of the ball, then the 49ers were able to just stand pat at number 11, whether they wanted to or not, and still get their guy in Michael Williams. The second pick in the draft, and I think there are reasons for concern with Alfred Collins just based on how the offseason program went. A big guy who wasn't able to get out there and kind of build that base as far as conditioning. But he was a guy the 49ers really liked throughout the process. And what John Lynch had to say about Alfred Collins was just that a big man in the middle kind of reminded them, in a sense, different body types, mind you, but a big guy in the middle like DeForest Buckner, like Eric Armstead. And he said those kinds of huge people make it hard for quarterbacks to function because it's hard to see. And he said Alfred Collins is a very skilled athlete and somebody who will have an opportunity to compete for playing time in a significant role from the beginning. So, I mean, I look at the 49ers draft and I think that, right off the bat, Michael Williams should be a week one starter. Alfred Collins, if healthy, should be a week one starter. I think Nick Martin, the linebacker, potentially week one starter. And then also Upton Stout at nickelback has an opportunity to be a week one starter at the nickelback position. And then I think with the fifth pick, CJ West, somebody who showed a lot, I think, during the offseason program. Will he be a starter week one? I think it'll be very difficult for two rookie guys to jump over uh, Jordan Elliott, but we shall see. Other part I wanted to talk about with John Lynch was just how the first part of the offseason kind of set up the second part of the offseason. So it was getting rid of slashing the cost on the roster of all those guys I talked about, and then signing Kittle, Purdy, and Warner to those lucrative contract extensions. Of course, Purdy being kind of the marquee deal of the offseason, making him the highest paid player in franchise history. Now, as far as the timing, getting all of this done basically before the start of OTAs, what John Lynch said was, that they had attempted to do those things in the past with all the other contracts, extensions that they've had, including last year with Trent Williams, with Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey. They did get done early, but he said that in this business, you do learn from the previous year, and they did have a lot of stuff as far as the contract stuff working against them last year. So he said, yeah, I mean, you learn from it, but you also it takes two to tango. So the team can want to get a deal done, but if the player's side continues to grind and they try to get everything and using deadlines as a negotiating ploy, then or a tactic, then it's difficult to get something done. But he said it was definitely something where both sides, the agents for Kittle, Purdy, and Warner, as well as the 49ers, worked together with that. And it was important for the 49ers to get it done early. And it seemed to be also important for those players to get it done early. Also talked to him about Brandon Ayuk, speaking of Brandon Ayuk. And um, what he said about Ayuk was that he feels like his rehab is coming along very well. He's often stated that really good athletes tend to heal faster than normal people, and he puts Brandon Ayuk in that category. He said that he's coming along very well, and they're very happy with what he's done behind the scenes to put himself in a position to return to action. But they didn't want to put a time frame. He doesn't want to put a time frame on Brandon Ayuk's recovery. Thing that complicates Ayuk's recovery is yes, it's the ACL, but it's also the MCL, which delayed the surgery. And then there's also stuff in there. So I think meniscus or ligament cartilage damage. So they're taking it slow with him. I still think, he'll certainly be placed on PUP at the start of training camp. And then I think there's a very good chance, almost I would say a likelihood that he will open the season on PUP as well. But it certainly sounds like, kind of reading between the lines, that the 49ers are very optimistic that he can return sooner than later and that um, when he comes back, they're not going to rush him, but when he comes back, they feel like he can get up to speed very quickly. The other guy, of course, that 49ers are really counting on to make a difference this year, returning from injury, Christian McCaffrey. And what Lynch had to say about him was that he looks good and he's healthy. He said that, if he's healthy and he looks healthy right now, that he's going to be productive. And what Lynch said was that he just affects the team. And that Kyle Shanahan talks about how Christian McCaffrey, unlocks the offense because he requires and commands or demands so much attention. And I do think that with McCaffrey on the team, I think the offensive line is better. They don't have to hold those blocks in the passing game as long because Christian McCaffrey offers Brock Purdy a reliable check down target. McCaffrey helps Purdy because of that. Purdy doesn't have to hold on the ball too long, waiting for things to open up. If that first read isn't there, oftentimes he can just dump it down to McCaffrey and still make a positive play. Also, with the offensive line, it doesn't just help them in the passing game as far as holding their blocks, but it also helps in the running game. The 49ers running game isn't designed by having these huge offensive linemen other than Trent Williams, just maul people at the line of scrimmage. It's based on athleticism and basically running interference and creating angles for the running back. And Christian McCaffrey does that better than anyone or as well as anybody as far as kind of diagnosing which hole to hit, when to hit it, and to get upfield and make positive yardage. So two big keys to the 49ers there. Two guys who missed, actually three guys, when you think about Trent Williams, Brandon Ayuk, and Christian McCaffrey, guys who missed a large chunk of the season, almost all of the season, with those three guys, three of their better players. Um, when they're all on the field together, 49ers offense should definitely benefit. And by extension, the 49ers defense should benefit as well because they'll be off the field longer, getting more rest with an offense which is now designed to sustain drives, put together first downs. And then we saw how the red zone offense faltered last season, especially early in the year. All those elements combined should make the 49ers offense better. All that said, with no Deebo Samuel, there's going to be an adjustment period for the 49ers wide receiving core. It's not a great name recognition wide receiving core right now. I think probably any objective observer would place the 49ers receiving core probably closer to the bottom than the top. But with Jawan Jennings, who looked very good the time that I saw him, he was dealing with a calf injury later on in the offseason program. They didn't want to take any chances there. And I think that was another thing that kind of permeated throughout the 49ers offseason. It was that they did not want to take any chances by getting guys out there and practicing when they had such injury issues last year. They just don't want to take any chances forcing guys out there. That will come later on. As far as the outlook of this team, because this was a 16-11 team, made a lot of changes in the offseason, a lot of roster turnover. And so I asked him, you know, what will define a successful season for this 2025 San Francisco 49ers? And the first thing that Lynch said was that at the end of the season, there's only one happy team. So he says ultimately that will define it. Um, but he also said, you know, he referred to the youth of the team. By the way, he also made a joke about Brant Boyer, the 49ers special teams coordinator. The 49ers have stated they want to get younger, and so they go out and they acquire a 39-year-old long snapper, 39-year-old punter. Long snapper and punter, I don't think are the areas where, teams generally talk about getting younger. I think we're talking more about the speed of defense, the speed on offense, and just, the ability to stay healthy. So we kind of joked that, yeah, I don't think the long snapper and the punter really count toward the overall getting younger on the roster. But what what Lynch did say was that, they will be a younger team. They can't help but be a younger team because of the players that left, because of the players that are coming in, most notably the 11 draft picks. And let's say, eight of those make the team, 49ers automatically become a younger team. What Lynch said was that it is a young man's game, but in kind of force feeding some of those young guys onto the field, they are going to take some lumps. And it is a very long season, 17 game regular season. So it would be logical and fully expected for the 49ers young players to make some mistakes, make some glaring mistakes early in the season. As he said, take some lumps. But he said that that's not an excuse for anything that's coming later as far as, the wins and the losses. He said it's just a reality. He says, I think we will have some young players playing, provided they earn those opportunities, and that is the key. The 49ers drafted five defensive players with their first five picks. They don't expect those guys to uh, to just sit by and lose those competitions to get on the field. They expect these guys, because of where they were drafted, to make an immediate impact, and that's what they're banking on. There will be mistakes along the way, as he said, but you look at some of the teams. Heck, the NFC West is a great example of what the Rams have done, and maybe to a degree too, what the Seattle Seahawks have done as far as trying to have that kind of the complementary younger players with the older established players. And this is where the 49ers are. They feel like they had a very good draft in 2024. And by all accounts, and just watching them their rookie seasons, I would agree that they did have a good draft last year. But this is a different kind of draft because of the emphasis back on the defensive line. That's where the 49ers can make a huge jump from this season, or from last season to this season. Right now, I don't think they're there, because when you look at the players lost as opposed to the players gained, I mean, they did lose some significant defensive players, but that young injection of youth should help the team out in the long haul. The question is, can it help them from the very first week of the season as these guys are finding their way? I think it does help when you have the defensive line. That is the area of emphasis, because those guys aren't playing every snap. They're specialized roles. They're playing anywhere from, say, 20 to 40 snaps. That's probably on the high side per game. And those guys can show a lot of improvement and a lot of development over time because you're kind of picking and choosing when those guys get on the field. So that's the quick rundown. Again, check out the John Lynch interview on 49ers Talk. Hopefully, you enjoy it, answers some of your questions about the direction of this team. And again, thank you for watching this on my YouTube channel. Leave a comment, a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. And that is it for now.